Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot. Today, we will be discussing the infallibility, or maybe giving us a choice, if there is a choice here, um, the infallibility of the Pope or the infallibility of Protestant preachers. Which? Are they both on the same page? You know, one of the things that is brought out in this article, and this article here is written by A.T. Jones in the American Sentinel of March 14th, 1895. Really and truly, Catholicism and Protestantism are going in the same direction. Now, I realize that this article was written in the 1800s, the late 1800s, 1895 to be exact. But some of these things still pertain to today. I mean, this is part of the reason why we're in the mess that we're in today as far as in the Protestant churches. And, you know, Catholicism, that's another subject to deal with. But unfortunately, Protestants have used the same tactics as Catholics have. And so we're going to discuss that. So the article by A.T. Jones begins. The Christian statesman is badly frightened at the aggressions of Romanism. Now, I would inform us that he's referring to the Christian Statesman. That's a periodical that was that existed back in the late 1800s, and it was mostly devoted to bringing down the wall that separates church and state in our Constitution. Okay, so in part he's addressing this Protestant journal, the Christian Statesman. So he says the Christian Statesman is badly frightened at the aggressions of Romanism. Romanism meaning Catholicism. But who is the Christian Statesman? The Christian Statesman is and has been for more than 20 years the mouthpiece of the National Reform Association, an organization that has persistently denounced the American idea of separation of church and state as political atheism. This is what they called the First Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the separation of church and state by law. They called that political atheism. These are Protestants saying such things. It is the mouthpiece of the organization that has demanded an amendment to the Constitution, definitely declaring that this is a Christian nation, but leaving the question as to who are the Christians to be settled by later enactments and decisions. So they're saying that this nation is a Christian nation. But who are the Christians then? If this nation is a Christian nation, then you have to say who are the Christians and who are not. The Christian Statesman and this association were the agencies which organized and led the forces which browbeat Congress into legislating on the question of which day is the Sabbath. The American Sentinel commenced its career by exposing the wickedness of the movement advocated by the Christian Statesman. The American Sentinel meaning this article is taken from that periodical by A.T. Jones. The Sentinel pointed out that the principles advocated by the statesman were essentially papal, and that the papacy would build on the foundation which was being laid by the statesman and its constantly augmenting forces. But instead of listening to our warning, the statesman made overtures to the Roman Catholics in the following words. Quote, whenever they, the Roman Catholics, are willing to cooperate in resisting the progress of political atheism, we will gladly join hands with them. Now notice what he's saying here. Notice what the Christian statesman is saying here. They're saying when the Catholic Church, when they are willing to cooperate in resisting the progress of political atheism, in other words, the separation of church and state. When they do that, we will gladly join hands with them, join hands with the papacy, unquote. Now, I want to bring to our attention a statement from the pen of Ellen White in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 711. She says, there are many, even of those engaged in this movement for Sunday enforcement, who are blinded to the results which will follow this action. They do not see that they are striking directly against religious liberty. It's amazing to me that people who believe that there should be Sunday legislation, and not that you don't see them out there, they're not prominent out there today, okay? But in those days, it was. But we will get to that here in this country. We will get to that point when people will begin, especially politicians and preachers, they will begin to really advocate for Sunday legislation, but not realizing, hey, you're striking directly against religious liberty here. There are many who have never understood the claims of the Bible Sabbath and the false foundation upon which the Sunday institution rests. Any movement in favor of religious legislation is really an act of concession to the papacy, which for so many ages has steadily warred against liberty of conscience. Sunday legislation owes its existence as a so-called Christian institution to the mystery of iniquity, and its enforcement will be a virtual recognition of the principles which are the very cornerstone of Romanism. When our nation shall so abjure the principles of its government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will in this act join hands with popery. This is why I put this statement in this article. It will be nothing else than giving life to the tyranny which has long been eagerly watching its opportunity to spring again into active despotism. This is Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 711. So, the Spirit of Prophecy is telling us that Protestantism, in the act of enacting a Sunday law, will join hands with popery. And so you have here, back then in the late 1800s, the Christian Statesman periodical was making overtures. When you make an overture, you're reaching out your hands, okay, to grasp another person's hand, making overtures to the Roman Catholics. And they said whenever the Roman Catholics, are willing to cooperate in resisting the progress of political atheism, meaning the separation of church and state, we will gladly join hands with them. Now, let me say this. You know, there are people who comment on the videos on the Jewels of Truth, okay, and they poo-hoo the idea that there will ever be a Sunday law enacted in the United States of America. But I would try at least to try to reason with you, with anyone listening to this presentation. Okay, you may not believe that there will ever be a Sunday law enforced in this country. I don't agree with you, but you may believe that. That will never happen. But I would at least appeal to you and ask, do you not realize that in enacting a Sunday law, if that was to happen, if you would even entertain that idea, that would be attacking religious liberty? Would you not even admit that? And that, yes, it is a concession to the papacy, because the papacy in and of itself is a union of church and state. You take away the union of church and state in the papacy, there's no more papacy. It would cease to exist. Okay? Let's go on. So, Brother A.T. Jones continues, papists were appealed to help resist the progress of political atheism by securing from Congress a law recognizing Sunday as the Christian Sabbath. And that was exactly what they were trying to do in the 1890s. Trying to get Congress to recognize Sunday as the Christian Sabbath, and thereby, and of course, going further than that, not just recognizing it as the quote-unquote Christian Sabbath, but to enforce it by law. In the meantime, the Supreme Court decided that this is a Christian nation. Armed with this remarkable decision, these Romanizing Protestants, talk about an amalgamation, Romanizing Protestants redoubled their exertions. Roman Catholic prelates were appealed to for assistance. Would you come over and help us, Mama? You know, because the Catholic Church considers itself the mother of all these churches, okay? Come and help us. These Protestant churches says, come help us, Mama. They responded, and the conspiracy was successful. Now, let me read another statement here from the Great Controversy, page 580. Marvelous in her shrewdness and cunning is the Roman Church. She can read what is to be. She bides her time, seeing that the Protestant churches are paying her homage in their acceptance of the false Sabbath, and that they are preparing to enforce it by the very means which she herself employed in bygone days. Yeah, she's saying that this is what the Catholic Church has done for a long time. She bides her time, and she sees what the Protestant churches are doing. And of course, we're 100 and more years past the writing of this article that I'm reading to you. So Protestantism has degenerated much, much more. Even Adventism has degenerated even much, much more than in those days. And so both regular Protestant churches and ashamedly even Adventist churches are reaching out their hands to the papacy. Let's see what we have in common. Let's see if we can come on common ground. Really? This is why this country is in the mess it's in. This is the same thing in the political realm that Americans in general have the mistake that they have made in going to, communist countries and entertain communism in this country. The only difference between communism and Catholicism is that one claims to be atheistical and the other claims to be Christian. Other than that, they're really the same thing. You take away those two issues, they're the same. In practice, they're the same thing. They both want to take away your liberty. They both want to take away your property. But that's a different subject. Those who reject the light of truth will yet seek the aid of this self-styled infallible power, that is the papacy, to exalt an institution that originated with her, that is the Sunday Sabbath. How readily she will come to the help of Protestants in this work, it is not difficult to conjecture. Who understands better than the papal leaders how to deal with those who are disobedient to the church? Yeah, they know how to deal with those who are disobedient to the church. Great Controversy, page 580. Brother Jones continues, a stock argument of these compromising Protestants in their demand for national legislation enforcing Sunday observance was to point to the decisions of courts that Christianity is a part of the common law. Okay, this is the excuse that they're giving for trying to enforce Sunday observance. They pointed to state Sunday laws, to national and state Thanksgiving proclamations, and to the employment of chaplains and national and state governments. They say, we have chaplains in the government, in national and state governments, so why couldn't we have a religious law, have a Sunday law? You have all these, Thanksgiving proclamations, both in the national and state governments. The American Sentinel declared that all these things were violations of the spirit of the Constitution, and that instead of demanding more legislation on the strength of these violations of the spirit of the Constitution, all these vestiges of the church-state polity of Europe should be abolished to harmonize with the Constitution. We declared that popular Protestantism in clinging to these vestiges of papal policy were nursing. Now notice, I like this statement that he makes. He says, we, the American Sentinel, declared that popular Protestantism in clinging to these vestiges or remnants of papal policy was nursing in its bosom the viper that would yet be used by the papacy to sting to death the principle of American liberty and through America the liberties of the world. A powerful statement, exactly true. This is what Protestantism has done for decades and is doing now. They have nursed the viper. They have nursed in its bosom the viper that would yet be used by the papacy to sting to death the principle of American liberty. And now we see our predictions being literally fulfilled. Back in the 1890s now, we see Rome building on the platform so blindly laid and upheld by the Christian statesmen and its allies. And the papacy has been building ever since. Pope Leo XIII, the shrewdest political diplomat in the world, seeing that the time had come to strike a decisive blow at American liberty, now so sorely wounded in the house of its friends, addressed an encyclical to the American government and people through the American bishops, condemning the American idea of separation of church and state. This kind of stuff really upsets me. The nerve of this heretic, the nerve of this heretic Pope, Pope Leo XIII, to write this encyclical to the American government and people. What did he say? Here is a part of it. Quote, "The church among you, unopposed by the Constitution and government of your nation," he's speaking, now notice here, he's speaking about the Catholic Church. Okay, he's not talking about the Protestant churches or any other church. He's talking about the Catholic Church. The church among you, he's saying to the American government leaders and the people, the church among you, unopposed by the Constitution and government of your nation, fettered by no hostile legislation, protected against violence by the common laws and the impartiality of the tribunals, is free to live and act without hindrance. So what more could you ask for? What more could you ask for? Oh, but that's not enough, see. That's not enough. Yet, though all this is true, it would be very erroneous to draw the conclusion that in America is to be sought the type of the most desirable status of the church. Well, I would say, well, then go somewhere else. If you think that this is not the most desirable status of your church, go somewhere else. Or that it would be universally lawful or expedient for state and church to be, as in America, dissevered and divorced. It would not be lawful or expedient for church and state to be, as in America, dissevered and divorced. She, the Catholic Church, notice, she, the Catholic Church, would bring more abundant fruits. What would those fruits be? If, in addition to liberty, she enjoyed the favor of the laws and the patronage of public authority. What does he mean by that? Oh, well, I think it's pretty easy to see, to understand. They want to have their laws enforced upon the people. Catholic doctrines and practices and everything about the papacy, about the Catholic Church, enforced upon the people whether they liked it or not. Oh, liberty, again, free to live and act without hindrance, protected against violence by the common laws and impartiality of the tribunals. That's not enough. No. We want to have our laws enforced by public authority. Brother Jones continues, a few compromised Protestants, startled by this bold bid for the patronage of American law and public authority, which they themselves were earnestly laboring to obtain, ventured to criticize the Pope's encyclical. Now, at that time, these compromised Protestants, they didn't like this papal encyclical. But Rome expected this and was ready for it. And what was her answer? She simply pointed to the platform which silly Protestants had themselves laid for her to build on. So the Protestants didn't like this papal bull. Well, the Catholics said, look, this is what you're doing. This is what you want. You want your laws, your Christian Protestant laws, to be forced upon the people, whether they like it or not. The following is the reply, which in substance has appeared in nearly every Roman Catholic newspaper in the United States. Immediately upon the publication of the encyclical, the quote-unquote very Reverend A.F. Hewitt, D.D., Superior General of the Paulists and editor of the Catholic World, wrote this reply and had it telegraphed to the leading papers of the country. So the papacy responds to the Protestant protest against this papal encyclical. This is what the papists wrote. Our greatest jurists have declared that this is a Christian country. Whenever this nation allows it to be legally enacted that this is a Christian nation, you are opening the door to popery. So the papacy says to the Protestants, our greatest jurists have declared that this is a Christian country. The Sunday is recognized and its observance protected by law. Thanksgiving and fast days are proclaimed by authority. Chaplains are appointed in legislatures, in the army and navy, colleges under the control of ecclesiastics, and institutes of charity have been liberally aided. And among these have been some institutions under the direction of Catholic authorities. There is nothing in this policy which is un-American. So they're saying that because for the Pope to say that we would like more than just the impartiality of the tribunals, more than just to be free to live and act without hindrance, we want to have our laws enforced by public authority. There's nothing, he says, in this policy which is un-American. Really? Of course the Pope would say that. Of course, this was written by this a papist. Anyway, it wasn't written by the Pope directly, but by a papist, a Catholic cleric. All right, so Brother Jones continues, in this manner does Rome defend its claim to the favor of the laws and patronage of public authority. And all those who have worked and are working for Sunday laws with which to force universal obedience to their misinterpretation of the fourth commandment, and are pointing to the governmental chaplains, Thanksgiving proclamations, and court decisions that this is a Christian nation as arguments to support in support of their claims, all such now stand stultified in the presence of Romish aggressions. Wow. Yes, this is the trap that they have set for their own selves, the Protestants did. But our readers will be interested in reading the pitiable wail of the Christian Statesman, again a Protestant publication, as it sees the papacy building on its foundation, on the Protestants' foundation. Okay, the Protestants build it, the Catholics want to start building it. I mean, the Protestants built this foundation, the Catholics come and they start building it, and the Protestants say, hey, you can't do that. And let it be remembered, while the following is perused, that it is from the same pen and the same paper that in 1884 wrote and published the before quoted petition to Roman Catholics asking that they, quote unquote, cooperate in resisting the progress of political atheism. You asked the Catholics to come and help you, and now you say, well, no, we didn't mean for you to go that far, which being interpreted was a request for Roman Catholic aid in breaking down the principle of separation of church and state embodied in what they termed an infidel document, the United States Constitution. We quote from the Christian Statesman of February 23rd, 1895. So this is what the Christian Statesman of February 23rd, 1895 says, and this is all an attack against Romanism, okay? Romanism, with keen appreciation of the vast issues at stake, and with far-reaching calculations as to the future, is employing every possible means to gain and hold the commanding and decisive position when the crisis which is sure to come in our national life shall be upon us. Now, I'm going to stop here in the middle of this paragraph, written again by this Protestant journal, the Christian Statesman. What they are saying here is hypocritical on their part, because in principle they believe the same thing as the papacy does. Okay? They're pointing the finger at the papacy when they themselves also have a problem in their own attitudes and principles. She, the papacy, in her millions of devotees from other lands to wield, she is pouring in her millions of devotees from other lands to wield the sovereign ballot here. Sound familiar? Sound familiar to our day? Are there devotees from the south of America that are pouring into this country to wield the sovereign ballot here? She is commanding them, the papacy is commanding them by her highest authority to take an active interest in political affairs and to subordinate all political conduct to the advancement of the Roman Catholic Church. This is the intent. You know, you hear some politicians today, Republican politicians and other conservative, news people and such, they're saying that the reason why they're letting all these illegal immigrants come into our country is so that, so the Democrats will have more votes, okay? This is what they say. And that is true. But it's really even more because they want the Catholic vote. Because most of those people coming from the South are Catholic. Make no mistake about it. Most everybody knows most of those people down south are Catholic. The papacy has planned this for decades. She is determined to control the common school system of our country. Back then, the Catholic Church was determined to control the common school system in our country, the public school system, that is, or to break it up and substitute for it her own parochial schools in which her rapidly multiplying youth shall be molded to her own liking and prepared to do without question her own authoritative bidding. Not satisfied with holding, as at the present, the balance of power as between the two great political parties, and receiving rich pay first from one and then from the other of these parties for her united vote that is sure to turn the tide of victory whichever way it goes, she aspires to positive and absolute direct control of our national life. This is the papacy. She aspires to positive and absolute direct control of our national life. And the ratio of the numerical increase of her youth will, with absolute certainty, bring this about. If her youth are not, by the maintenance of our common schools, our public schools, molded into the true and loyal American citizens. And this education of her youth is what Rome is now, with all her energies setting herself to accomplish. In the final issue, Romanism claims to decide all moral questions, and her quote-unquote infallible interpretation of moral law must be imposed upon the schools and upon the state itself. This, let me remind us here, again, this is a Protestant journal, the American, not the American, but the Christian Statesman that's making these statements. This, and they're partly true, this is the Roman or papal principle, and its inexorable logic is the Inquisition for all who do not submit. Okay? This is where we're headed. This is where we were headed then, this is where we're headed now. This is the Roman or papal principle, and its inexorable logic is the Inquisition of all who do not submit. This is what we're headed towards, the Inquisition. This is the principle that now threatens the nation's right to interpret God's moral law for itself. Do Protestants really believe that? That each person is to interpret God's law, moral law for himself? You know, we have liberty of conscience in this country. Our Constitution guarantees that. The two systems are in their death grapple these closing years of the 19th century. Our nation was born in the providence of God, a Protestant nation, with the Bible as its ultimate law, and the nation itself the responsible interpreter of that law in its own proper sphere of action. Shall it continue such a nation? Shall it retain the Bible to its schools and train its youth and all its youth, in whom the nation's future is bound up to know God's word and the duties of citizenship as taught in that word? Shall our legislators and judges and executive officers and our people at large go to God's moral law or to the Roman pontiff to know what are the rights and duties of the nation and of her citizens and subjects? This is the conflict on one side of the great moral and political battlefield on which the contending forces in our national life are already engaged. Do we know our danger, or are we on our guard? To be aware of the danger in time is half the battle won. And so much of what this periodical is saying is true. They're absolutely right in all of this. But they're not really showing this by trying to get the government to enforce Sunday legislation, Christianity upon the people. Brother Jones continues. Now, this is the end of the Protestant journal, the Christian Statesman, okay? That's the end of their statement. So now Brother Jones now is going to end this article. He says, the two systems that are in their death grapple these closing years of the 19th century are here presented as the infallibility of the Pope and the infallibility of the quote-unquote nation. The papal system places the infallibility in the Pope. The Christian Statesman, this Protestant journal, professedly places the infallibility in, quote, our legislators and judges and executive officers and our people at large, unquote. Both systems demand an infallible interpretation of the moral law which shall be binding on all. But who shall interpret the moral law for these legislatures and judges? Is each man to be left to his own private interpretation? No, indeed. The Christian Statesman and its allies will not permit this. One case will suffice to illustrate this truth. The moral law says the seventh day is the Sabbath. The Christian Statesman, this Protestant journal, interprets this moral law to mean the first day is the Sabbath, Sunday, that is, and then hands this interpretation to legislators and judges with the demand that it be accepted and acted upon under penalty of political death. In other words, if you don't vote this into law, we just won't vote for you next election cycle. This, the Christian Statesman, this Protestant journal, and its allies have done and are doing, thus actually claiming for themselves the infallibility they professedly claim for the nation. The death struggle now going on in this nation is therefore between the infallibility of the Pope and the infallibility of popish Protestant preachers, between the beast and his image. The true child of God will refuse to bow to the dictates of either. He will go to God's moral law to ascertain his duty, and will refuse to worship by his obedience to either the Roman pontiff or his American image. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. And they have no rest, day nor night, who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Revelation 14, 9 through 12. And that is the end of A.T. Jones's article in the American Sentinel of March 14, 1895. So which will it be with you, my friend? The infallibility of the Pope or the infallibility of Popish Protestant ministers? I hope you choose neither one, but that you go to the Scriptures as the final authority. If you have appreciated this video and its presentation, we would encourage you to tap that like button so that it can be sent far and wide to those who are hungering for truth in these last days. And if you have any comments or questions, then please place them at the bottom of this video. We would encourage you to do so, that is, and if you haven't subscribed yet, we would highly encourage you to do so. Thank you for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. We hope and pray that you will have a good day in the Lord.